Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming along to this particular session, which is sponsored by Cancer Alliance Queensland this afternoon. It's really great to see some lovely, friendly faces in the audience. This is a little bit different, this session, and we're really excited to actually be able to introduce to you the members of the partnership, who are the key governing body who oversee the safety and quality program for cancer in Queensland. The way the session is going to run is we'll have 3 very short rapid-fire presentations, and that's really to set the scene and give you an idea or concept of the type of work that Cancer Alliance Queensland undertakes in partnership with clinicians across the state. And then we're going to move into a facilitated discussion going to be led by Sandro Porsadou. And at that point, we'll ask all the members to come and sit up here at the very long table. Please be careful of the little stairs at either side. We've had to sign a waiver, so please don't fall off on your way up or down. And then Sandro's going to take us through a discussion about what it's been like, what the experiences have been for the members of the partnership, some of whom have been with us since the very beginning, which is nearly about 18 years in Queensland. So I'd just like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Jagera and Turrbal peoples, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and pay my respects to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be with us in this session this afternoon. So I'm going to introduce all 3 speakers at once so that we can just get going. No? Yes. First of all, we have Nathan Dunn. Nathan's a biostatistician who's been with us at Cancer Alliance for many, many years, and he has led this particular piece of work in the development of the new Cancer Data Explorer, which was just released in the last month, and he's going to talk about that. Then Bryan Chan, who's a medical oncologist from the Sunshine Coast University Hospital, is going to give us a little sweet introduction to non-small cell lung cancer and its management in Queensland. And then Michelle Morris, who also is a medical oncologist, also from the Sunshine Coast, is going to talk to us about the development of a KPI for breast cancer in Queensland and touch on some new information that we hope to be able to use in the near future. So welcome, Nathan.
Thanks, Shoni. Just going to have a look at a new tool that we've released in the last couple of weeks, the Cancer Data Explorer. It's pretty exciting to be able to offer this new interactive platform to the public and to researchers, clinicians alike, so that anyone can get a glimpse into what's going on with cancer data in Queensland, all the way back from 1982 through to today. This is going to be a bit of a lightning tour. This is just phase 1 of the Cancer Data Explorer, and we'd love to hear back and get some feedback from you all on things that you'd like to see in future editions and feedback on the functionality and how it works. So after you leave this session, feel free to click the links and log on and have a play around. So there are 3 main areas that we've focused on for the first phase of Cancer Data Explorer. Those are incidents. And so we present data. You'll be able to see at the top here, if I have the pointer. There we go. We've got count data, we've got rates data, and we've got age standardised rates. And so for incidence and mortality, we've presented the data in this view. We've got data by year and by age group, by cancer and geography. And so there's a number of ways that you can interact with the data. You can use the filtering options pane, or you can actually drag around on the graphs themselves and interact to select the different options that you are interested in. Whoops, let's go back to the presentation. And then the next section is mortality. So again, we've got the same 4 views, but here I'm just illustrating that we can split the data. This is presenting the data by sex, so you can see how many males versus females were diagnosed in Queensland over that time period, or with different types of cancers, and what the different age distributions look like. The final section I'm going to focus on is survival, and one of the really cool things that we've implemented here is the ability to draw your own Kaplan-Meier curves by selecting different survival time periods, different cancers, filtering to males or females, different age groups, different amounts of follow-up time or different diagnosis years, so you can really get a sense of being able to compare what survival looks like across different populations. And because we've got data going back to 1982, we're really able to draw those graphs out to 25 years if we like to sort of see long-term effects of and survival rates for different types of cancers. And lastly, when you first log on, it takes you to the summary page, and this is just some short infographic tiles presenting you with either the last 5 or the most recent year of cancer data in Queensland and what those summary measures look like for incidence, mortality and survival. So just things like the number of cancers diagnosed, the median age at diagnosis, what are the most common causes of cancer death or the most commonly diagnosed cancers, and what's my lifetime risk as just your average Queenslander of being diagnosed with a cancer or of dying from cancer in my lifetime up to age 85. All right, let's test the technology. This is a really quick video showing how the Cancer Data Explorer can be used. So you can see when you first log on, you've got the welcome message here. I'm going to click that off. And I thought I'd just highlight one way that you might go about using the Cancer Data Explorer. And so I'm going to use it to look at, is there an effect of screening on colorectal cancer incidence in Queensland, and how we can use the different pages on the Explorer to at least get a start to have a look into what's going on. So you can see here I'm filtering to colorectal cancer, and then further down I'm filtering to colon cancer specifically. And you can see here now I've got the last 5 years worth of diagnoses. These are just count data, so something that might be useful. I know the screening program started back in the mid-2000s, if you like, so I want to look at some longer term data. And so I'm going to go back to, let's say, 1992 and then see what that data looks like. Now again, this is presented as count data at the moment. You can see the number of cancers in that top left-hand pane has been going up year on year. There's a little bit of a dip there in the sort of the late 2000s, but mostly the trend has been upwards. But of course, we know that the population's been growing over time, so we would expect to have more cancers diagnosed as time goes on because there's more people living in Queensland, more people are going to be diagnosed with cancer. So the next thing that I might be interested in doing is actually looking at the rates per 100k page. And I hope that in my recording I clicked on that really soon, because there we go. So when we turn that into a rates per 100k, that will actually show us the proportion of people being diagnosed with cancer. So it takes out the effect of population growth over time. And here you go, you can see when I've clicked on the rates per 100k, the line is actually fairly flat. You can see maybe around 2005 or 2006 when the screening program started. It's basically been a flat line since then, maybe with a tiny bit of a drop. But the other thing we notice is that when we look at rates per 100k, it's actually much more commonly diagnosed in older people. And so we know that the population of Queensland has been ageing. And so if we have an ageing population and a growing population, the fact that this line is staying the same is actually, maybe that's a good news story, because with older people and a growing population, you would expect that line still to be going up. So when we use the age standardised rates page here, we can see that around the time of, let's see if I can get this, around the time of the implementation and screening, we started off with a rate there that was about, my eyes are good, I think it was about 45. By the time we got back to the end, I should have paused it, it's about 37. So the rate of colorectal cancer incidence has gone down about 20% in the last sort of 15 years. The other thing we know is that it was progressively rolled out over time to different age groups. And we started off with 55-year-olds, 65-year-olds, if my memory is correct, and progressively implemented an expansion of that program to age 75 over time. And so if I focus in on looking at just those age groups that are involved in screening and go back to the rates per 100k, you can see what's happened here in the incidence of colon cancer from 2005-06 down here to 2019. And that's probably about a 33% reduction in colon cancer incidence since the time that screening was introduced, which is not totally necessarily associated with screening, but the idea of colorectal cancer screening is not only just detecting cancers at an early stage, you're also finding precancerous lesions and adenomas, and you can remove those before they actually turn into cancers. So this is one screening program where we would hope to actually see reductions in cancer incidence over time. Just a quick look here at the summary page, and this is filtered to lung cancer. And so it gives you a snapshot of what lung cancer in Queensland looks like at the moment. You can see on the bottom pane, it's the sixth most common cancer under this hierarchy. Yeah, it's the most common cause of cancer death. And you can see the average age at diagnosis and death and other associated summary information with lung cancer. So there's limited filtering at the summary. The real sort of granular information is available within the other three tabs, but this is just a snapshot, if you like, a teaser, a taster into what you can find deeper in the dashboard. So that was a quick dive into what's there, what's available. We'd love to hear back from you. We'd love to get some feedback. So for those who are going back to their office this afternoon or tomorrow or even next week, please dive into it. You can see the web address there at the bottom. Cancer Data Explorer is the extension after you get to our website. And any feedback, please to cancerdataqueensland@health.qld.gov.au. Thanks very much.
Well, good day, everyone. I'm Bryan, and I'm going to be talking about the current landscape of non-metastatic lung cancer in Queensland. Apologies to those of you who've been to COSA, because this is going to be a rehash, but actually a cut-down version of that. First of all, thank you very much to the Cancer Alliance project team, without whom this work wouldn't be possible. And I guess the first question a lot of us ask is, why is there now interest in non-metastatic lung cancer at all? Well, for many years, there's been lots of progress in metastatic or advanced disease above the pink arrow, but only recently has there been improvements in unresectable or earlier stage cancers with durvalumab, and more recently with osimertinib following chemo. But last year, the Empower 010 study showed that adjuvant atezolizumab after chemotherapy improves survival, and this is, as of this month, approved on the PBS for PD-L1 high patients. And in addition, earlier this year, the Checkmate 816 study was published showing the benefit of neoadjuvant nivolumab plus chemo for earlier stage lung cancer as well. In addition, we have now a positive step towards lung cancer screening, which will hopefully lead to stage migration and earlier detection, similar to what Nathan was describing. So the aims of this project were to look at non-metastatic non-small cell lung cancer in Queensland, looking at epidemiology, treatment patterns, and looking at survival from 2011 to 2019. Now, the other question is, a lot of us actually don't know this, but how common is non-metastatic lung cancer? And the data from Cancer Australia, which is they acknowledge is quite poor, goes back to 2011, where you have approximately 10% in each stage 1, 2, and 3. But you'll see on the end there that there's an alarming 30% of unknown. How does this compare to other countries? We have Canada in the teal and England in green. And you'll see that, again, there's about 10% across each stage, but where it differs is that in Canada, they have far less unknown, which translates to about a 20% stage 1 patients. What about here in Queensland? So this is how we compare. Again, looking at the unknowns, there's less compared to the national average, so there's only 15%. And again, that correlates to about a 20% stage 1, 10% stage 2 and 3, and the remainder in stage 4 shown there. If you take a bird's eye view and you step back and you say, these are all patients with stages 1 to 3 now, what are the treatments being used for these patients? And as you can see, with increasing stage on the bottom, there's reduced use of surgery in the orange and increasing use of radiotherapy and other adjunct therapies, particularly concurrent in the dark blue as shown. If we take a deeper dive into stage 1 non-small cell lung cancer, there are about 3,000 patients in the period that we're looking at, of which over 2/3 had surgery plus some form of adjuvant therapy as well. But about a quarter of patients only had radiotherapy without surgery. If we look at that again, with surgery, here's the patients who received surgery alone for stage 1. As you can see, there are some smaller groups with use of chemotherapy or radiation in addition to surgery. What about those who had radiation for stage 1? So this is about 20% of the people who had treatment. And of those, we're hoping to get in future merging of the data sets with radiotherapy information to understand better if this was stereotactic radiation or external beam radiation, acknowledging that these are periods from 2011 as well. I've skipped over stage 2 in the interest of time, which looks similar to stage 1. But what about for stage 3, which is usually the patients with more advanced, locally advanced disease? So as expected here, the use of surgery is far less in about 13% of people, whereas radiotherapy and or chemotherapy is about 3/4 of patients. And increasingly, there's about 13% of patients who don't receive any therapy at all. If you look at radiation, what do people actually get with radiation? So the vast majority got concurrent chemotherapy and radiotherapy. And acknowledging that some of this data is older, there was also some use of sequential chemotherapy, radiotherapy, which is the older style. What about the rates of neoadjuvant systemic therapy? So I must warn you that these are small numbers, looking at 27 and 34 for stages 2 and 3. But as expected, again, for stage 3 cancer, you have increasing use of neoadjuvant therapy compared to earlier stages. What about the longer-term trend? As Nathan mentioned, you can look at trends over time. So here we see from 2011 to 2020, and there's a sharp drop in 19, and whether or not this is the effect of the pandemic or the effect of the Pacific study being published with the survival data coming in 2019. I know that in some, anecdotally, you can say that there were some patients who were perhaps borderline, and rather than pushing them to neoadjuvant therapy and surgery, people were much more comfortable, given the survival improvement, to say, let's do chemoradiotherapy followed by durvalumab. So I think this is perhaps one of the reasons there. It'll be interesting to see this trend now with the latest Checkmate 816 study to see if this will really take off again with nivolumab chemo. With the data set, we can also look at association. So who are people more likely to get neoadjuvant therapy? They were likely to be male, aged 50 to 59, reasonably fit with 0 to 1 comorbidities, usually cardiac or diabetes. And they're actually more likely if you were from a regional facility. So in this case, Toowoomba or Hervey Bay. Also more likely if you were First Nations, which was about 1% higher. Now, the reasons for those could be hypothesized to be that patients may be presenting later, requiring downstaging, etc. In addition, you're more likely if you were discussed at an MDT or if you were treated in the private sector. What did people actually get for their neoadjuvant therapy? As expected, platinum-based therapies predominated, but you'll notice that there's a large unknown here, and this is where we really need better integration with all private sectors to ensure that all the data is captured and shared. What about the rates of adjuvant systemic therapy? So again, a bit better than neoadjuvant now, but in line with other countries around the world. Again, for stage 2 and 3, these rates are not 100%, but they're more likely around the 50% mark. What are the factors associated with adjuvant therapy? Again, males aged 50 to 59, people with 0 comorbidities, living in a major city, affluent, non-First Nations, presented at MDT, or again treated in the private sector. This is another way of showing the data here, but again, if you were aged over 70, as seen here, oh sorry, I just realized the mouse doesn't point, aged over 70, you were less likely to get post-operative adjuvant therapy, or if you were from a rural area or multimorbid as well. Again, what are the therapies as expected? Platinum-based, but also the unknown. If we take a closer look at stage 3 patients who completed chemoradiotherapy, this is the use of consolidation durvalumab. And again, this graph shows you a sharp increase with compassionate access to durvalumab, and this was PBS listed in 2020. So again, we should hopefully see this increasing. But again, the challenge will be how do we negotiate the once-in-a-lifetime PBS rule for use of IO. And lastly, just touching on survival for early lung cancer. So the difference, again, this is Cancer Australia's information, which is quite outdated now, showing the 5-year survival for each stage of lung cancer. And in comparison to other cancers, for example, prostate and colorectal, you'll see here stage for stage 2, instead of 99%, lung cancer is down at 32%, which is one of the main reasons why we're interested in this space. So in terms of Cancer Alliance Queensland data, this is for 2011 to 2019. These are all the survivals for 5-year survival by stage. And what I haven't shown here today, which Nathan touched on, was the ability to show neoadjuvant versus not. But because of small numbers, there really wasn't any difference in the data set that we have currently. So in conclusion, this is the current landscape for non-metastatic lung cancer in Queensland for the period. I've shown you the treatment patterns and the factors associated with both adjuvant and neoadjuvant therapy. And I think the future really lies in enriching this data with full integration of the private sector, full integration and getting the granularity of all the radiotherapy data as well, And it'll be interesting to see the impact of neoadjuvant and adjuvant therapy as well as screening on this data set in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Bryan. I'm Michelle Morris. I'm going to present today some of the data coming out of the Breast Cancer Subcommittee. So for those who were at the session this morning, you would have seen that we've recently released the Breast Cancer Quality Index, which looks at a huge number of patient data from the 2010 to 2019 and outcomes of treatment, timeliness of treatment, with the aim of developing performance indicators around which we can look at assess the quality of care. I'm going to present in this session just a little bit about where we're going over the most recent years with the data that we're now starting to collect on receptor status of these patients, which previously has been a huge gap in our knowledge. So this is the initial data looking at 13,000 people diagnosed with breast cancer from 2017 to 2020 that we've been able to look at the receptor data on. So you can see from this that around 3/4 of the patients were in the hormone receptor positive and the HER2 negative group on the left-hand side, and around 10% of our patients diagnosed in Queensland over these years were triple negative patients on the right-hand side, with those in the middle being the HER2 positive, either hormone receptor positive or hormone receptor negative. This shows the outcome of triple negative patients or features of triple negative patients compared to the hormone receptor positive HER2 negative group of patients. And as you can see, they're generally a younger cohort of patients, with 11% of the triple negative patients being aged less than 40 compared to 3.4% of those with hormone receptor positive disease. When you look at comorbidities, generally there was a slightly higher rate of comorbidities, of 2 or more comorbidities in the triple negative patients. They were less likely to have lobular cancer, which we'd expect. Higher grade tumours generally, with 79% being grade 3 tumours, and also less likely to have stage 1 disease at diagnosis. So only 34% of triple negative patients had stage 1 disease at diagnosis compared to 48% of those who are hormone receptor positive. For each receptor group, we examined the type of treatment received as well as the treatment timing. For each of the groups of patients, there were a small number of patients who received radiation first, but they were mostly comprised of patients with metastatic disease at diagnosis. The most common treatment for women with a hormone receptor positive HER2 negative tumour was surgery followed by radiation therapy. So reflecting, I guess, the earlier stage of diagnosis of this group of patients with hormone receptor positive disease. The most common treatment schedule for patients with triple negative disease was surgery followed by systemic therapy followed by radiation therapy. You can see in the patients who had systemic therapy, fourth box down, I think, so neoadjuvant therapy, so started out with systemic therapy, then went on to surgery and radiation. That was much more common in the HER2 positive groups of patients, at around 20% of those patients. And that's something that will be useful over time for us to look at going forward with changes in treatment approaches and the increasing use of neoadjuvant therapy in those triple negative and HER2 positive patients. If we look at overall survival by receptor cohort, you can see in the table on the right-hand side that generally our patients, this is early data, keep that in mind. These are patients from 2017 onwards, so this is early data. But the 2-year breast cancer specific survival for the overall cohort was 98.2%. However, we did find that there was clearly a difference in the triple negative cohort, who had a 2-year survival of 93%. So where to from here? So the ongoing routine recording of hormone receptor and HER2 status in this Queensland population-based breast cancer data is going to allow for more extensive analysis of breast cancer by subgroup, and we'll be able to examine guideline concordant care within those breast cancer subgroups, and in particular the rarer breast cancer subgroups who tend to have a poorer survival, such as the triple negative patients. And so I think over the years to come, this is going to be a huge wealth of data and information that we'll be able to capture on our population and how our patients are treated. Thank you very much.